This is Tomislav from Antichrist, and with great honor and pleasure with us, we have the bass player and vocalist for in my opinion, the greatest death metal bands, Ross Dolan from Immolation. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you. So,
how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Excited. We're past the critical listening phase of the record. Now we can enjoy it, and we can get some feedback from you guys. So it's been a busy time, but it's also been a very rewarding time to finally get some feedback, and it's been positive, more or less. So we're happy about that. So
let's talk about the new album, Acts of God. It's been like 5 years since your last one. So what was happening between those 5 years? I think that's the second longest gap between albums. So what was happening between the Atonement to Acts of God? What was happening? The tour and writing process, how did that came out?
Yeah, I mean, Atonement, we had a busy cycle for Atonement. We did a lot of touring. We did like 3 tours in the US, 3 tours in Europe. We did a lot of festival stuff. We went to Asia, South America. So Atonement was a very busy couple of years for us. So we had planned to finish the Atonement cycle at the end of 2019, which we did. The European we did over there with Ragnarok was the end of that cycle. We came home, and then we planned on taking a couple of months, break, and then, finish the new record. Bob started writing Acts of God probably in like 2018, sometime in 2018. So by the time we finished the Atonement cycle, we had about 4 or 5 songs that were written, not completed, but written musically. So we were, really ahead of the game at that point. That's unusual for this band. Usually where, we kind of book the studio time and we're very like rush, try to make the deadline. So, the fact that we had a jump on it helped. But then the world shut down, the pandemic hit. So unfortunately, we were looking at a lot of downtime, and we didn't know how much downtime we were going to have. So we made use of the time. It was nice to not have to rush the process. I think Bob was less stressed, and he was able to, write more songs. We got a lot more songs on this record, as you know. We got 13 songs, and he wrote 2 really cool instrumentals that I think set the tone really well for the beginning and the end of the album. So all in all, it was a very ambitious, album, for us. It was a longer record, but I guess, record. And given the fact that
it's your longest record, the usual records are 40 minutes. This one is around 55 minutes, I think. Yeah,
but back in the early days, we were like the 8-song special, So
well, if now songs are good, it's enough. 8 songs, if they're all good, it's enough, So
sure, yeah. I mean, it's obviously quality over quantity always, So but it's just that we had the time, and it was nice to not be rushed and be stressed. So we got, we had a nice amount of time to really learn the songs, absorb the songs, and just become more familiar with the songs before we got in the studio. And I think that helped tremendously. I think, the recording process this time was extremely smooth. It was fun. We didn't have any last minute changes or adjustments like we typically do. So everything was pretty solid going in. We actually had a couple of rehearsals before we went in to record the record. Which is extremely new. We never rehearsed.
I think since 2010, you quit rehearsals because your drummer lives from you like 14 hours away.
It was always challenging, especially when I lived in Yonkers. Bob and I lived in Yonkers, so we would have to, after our work week, we'd leave on a Friday night after work and drive 8, 9 hours, 10 hours out to Ohio, rehearse for 2 days, and come home and work again. So obviously that was a challenge. That was a nightmare, so we stopped that. But this time it was nice to actually get together and, you know, rough out the songs, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
the way it should be done, you know. So that was awesome. So I think that really helped, and I think it
help,
helped
yeah,
make this
yeah,
record a much tighter, and a much more pleasurable experience, you know.
yeah.
So
Now that you mentioned it, actually, it feels like, since, in my opinion at least, since Majesty in Decay, this is the most fluid record. Just feels like from song to song, there is no like sudden stop. It just goes on and hits and it hits and hits. Like I think it's Majesty. It's your best record, definitely,
wow,
definitely.
thank you. You know, and it's cool you said that because you know, the flow of the record, how the songs are sequenced on the record, is extremely important. You know, you don't want to have all your strong stuff up top and then have a
Yeah,
lull
yeah,
in the middle,
yeah.
you know. So luckily, you know, Bob wrote a lot of really good songs on this record. They were all standalones to me. So
Hmm.
as challenging as, you know, the sequencing was for this record, it was still easy in the sense that all the songs kind of worked really well together and everything kind of flowed together. So, you know, we knew right away, like, for example, what the opening track was going to be. When we were in the studio still recording, we knew, okay, An Act of God is probably going to be the leadoff
Yeah,
song after the
it
intro.
hits immediately.
Just
Yeah,
exactly, because it hits you hard, but it also, I think, has a lot of really cool elements to start out with. You know, it has just really heavy, dark uh parts with the overlay sections, the weird kind of acoustic part, which kind of goes into the big epic part after that, and then it explodes at the end, and it just kind of takes you into a different direction. So
yeah.
just a cool song. And you know, when we had the lyrics and I laid down the vocals to that song and we were listening, we're like, yeah, this is definitely going to be the lead off track. So we knew that going into it. And I knew Apostle was going to be the closer because that was the last song he wrote. And that was the kind of the last piece to the puzzle. So it just felt like a really good closer. So everything in between was just a matter of making sure we didn't have a lot of slow stuff together and make sure
Yeah,
everything
filler
kind of
tracks and something like that. Yeah,
exactly. So it just kind of worked well. We got lucky with that. So I'm glad
yeah.
you mentioned that.
I think it's amazing. There's like 15 tracks, and I listened to the album today twice. It was like there's no fillers. You know,
Awesome. Wow,
when
that's big props.
well,
That's big
when
props.
a band like releases an album like with 12, 13 tracks, and you're like, okay, 90% it's excellent. But those
Awesome.
two songs,
Awesome.
like, I can live without those. But this one just
Yeah.
hits and
Bye.
hits, and it's like really like I maybe
That's
it's still fresh in my mind. Is like this is something like between Majesty and Decay and Close to World Below. You know, mostly maybe because of the overall vibe. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's Immolation after Close to World Below kind of went from anti-religious topics to more social topics, to more human element topics. But with this one, kind of get not abandoning the human element, but still went back to religion a bit.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You are absolutely correct. And everything. I mean, after when Unholy Cult came out, you were right. That was when we had that shift from the more religious themes into, like you said, looking at just humanity, you know, with a
yeah,
more critical eye, in a social sense, and just, you know, in a real world sense, because, you know, Unholy Cult was written right after 9/11.
yeah, yeah. It feels
So
that way.
9/11 really left a huge impact on us because we were there, we lived there, we went down there after it happened. We had people who were down there. So it definitely made a mark on us for sure. And I think that dictated the direction we went with Unholy Cult and the subsequent records after that. So yes, you are absolutely right there. And with this record, you are correct. We did kind of revisit some of those earlier anti-religious themes, uh, obviously from a fresher perspective, but some similar ideas. You know, topically, you could say the first track, An Act of God, is very similar to Father, You're Not the Father.
Yeah, especially.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Because it's still a problem. It's still a
Totally.
problem. You know, after over 20 years, it's still a problem that you read
Yeah.
about almost daily in the news feeds. It's a problem that has not been addressed, and it's very prevalent in the church. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of disappointing that something like this at this magnitude would not have been addressed, and it still happens, you know. So these are the little things that we kind of focused on. And it's not a pandemic album lyrically,
Oh no.
because we didn't want it to be a pandemic album. There was so many other things that we drew inspiration from over the last number of years, you know, in a human sense. So Acts of God is just really, you know, looking at our world, as is the last number of records, you know what I'm saying? But again, like you said, we do touch heavily on the religious themes, more attacking the institutions, you know, behind the ideas, but also some of the ideas as well, you know. But it's not a concept album, because it's not only that. We still do obviously address the human element, you know, the personal element as well in this record. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, but I think there's enough flavors in there to keep it interesting. It's approached in a very dark way, in a very personal way. And I think it's written in a way that's ambiguous, to allow our listeners to kind of extract what they want from it. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
not, obviously each song is very specific, you know, as far as what they are written about. But I think we try, as always, to write them in a very open sense, because as a lyrical person, as someone who always enjoyed lyrics, as you know, from the time I was 13 to now, I always enjoyed, when I got a record for the first time and listened to it, to read along with the lyrics and try to, you know, see what the artist was trying to say, what was in their heads, what did these songs mean, what did they mean to the artist, and what am I getting out of that? And we try to write our songs in a similar fashion, you know, to make it fun and interesting, so that our fans could get something out of the lyrics as well as the music, you know.
It makes you think,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, to make you think, but without doing it in a very in a preachy way, you know,
No,
without,
no.
you know, being on a soapbox. I never liked that. So this is just kind of, it's our interpretation of what we see around us. It's our humble opinion, and it's our perspective, and that's all it is. So,
Yeah. So after 11 records and 2 EPs, what's the biggest obstacle in writing albums like the Acts of God? You know, the album that you're like, every band wants to record, like. So what's your biggest obstacle to stay in quality and still being fresh?
It's always a challenge. Each cycle is a challenge, especially after like an album like Atonement. You know, Atonement, like I've said countless times, really set the bar high for us. You know, it was a very good album. It was received really well by the fans and by the press as well, which is unusual for us. We're never the cool band. You know, we're always the band that, like, you know, yeah, they're good, but, you know, or like, it's a
Media
good
is
album,
small.
but, or it
Yeah.
sounds good, but, you know, there's always a but when our name comes up. And that, you know, hey, we're used to it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think it makes us stronger. It makes us strive harder to create something even better, you know. So I think each album cycle is unique in its own way. It represents who we are as people and musicians at that specific point in time in our lives. So but yeah, it's always a challenge to create something that's fresh and different, but still true, and something that embodies who you are, you know, the essence of the band. You know, we never wanted to be the band that takes that experimental left turn, you know what I'm saying? And
Well,
does something.
some songs from your albums are a bit experimental. Like I remember picking up the first time I heard you was Here and After, and the song Christ's Cage, which is
Yes.
so progressive for us. Like the atmosphere in that song, and I actually the whole album is. I mean, it's, in my opinion, maybe the most progressive stuff you have in there. At least in my opinion, so maybe not the word progressive, but more introverted. it has something, it has something else, that album. Yeah.
I agree. And I guess progressive is a good word. As progressive as we were, I mean, I wouldn't classify us as overall as being progressive, but in some ways, yes. So I don't want to contradict myself. But yeah, that album specifically was, I believe, as well as Failures for Gods. I think both of those albums, and I think the reason why is because Bob was still trying to find his way as a writer, and still trying to kind of fine tune our style. What did Immolation mean to us? What was the vision? And it was trying to, I guess, understand that vision and try to move forward, after Dawn of Possession. So yeah, those two albums, I think, were an attempt to identify us as, and create an identity for us, a unique identity, but still carrying that torch, from the earlier days. So I think by the time we hit Close to World Below and Unholy Cult, we were already trying, things were starting to mesh. You know what I'm saying? We were finally starting to come together as, and be more solid as songwriters and as players too. It all plays, comes together, at the same time. So yeah, so that's always a challenge. But yeah, they were definitely more progressive records. And I think over the years, I think the most important thing I think we've gotten out of this whole ride is we have more confidence now as musicians and songwriters. So when Bob starts each new album cycle, he starts it with a little more confidence than the previous one. So, and I'm confident in the sense that I know whatever he's going to deliver to me and the rest of the guys as a demo is probably going to be 98% where it needs to be. You know what I'm saying? I'm confident in that sense. And if it's not, then he tweaks it, he adjusts it, he arranges it differently, or he, so there's never any weirdness in that sense. If we don't like something, he's cool with that. He's like, okay, I don't want to, a lot of times I'm the guy that will recognize stuff that sounds similar to either our own stuff or to other band stuff. So I'm
Especially
like,
you have like 10 albums, they're like, I heard this.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always a little bit of that on every record, well, I'll say, wow, that sounds really cool, but it's kind of reminiscent of this band.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So as soon as he hears that, he's like, okay, and he completely omits it and deletes it and creates something different. So, he's really very receptive as far as criticism, in a positive way. So that's, you have to have that. You have to have that. So
especially,
anyways. So you are correct as far as but as far as being progressive now, progressive in the sense is we're always trying to, redefine ourselves, but we're always trying to stay true to who we are, if that makes sense,
Yeah. Speaking of your sound, my friend actually told me, like, you need to ask him this because you're talking with Ross Dolan. So when Rigor Mortis became Immolation back in New York and back in the day, what was your sound influence? Because as I remember, New York was very much thrash metal scene. So here comes Immolation with this very twisted riffs, very brooding atmosphere, almost black metal atmosphere. One friend also told me if Immolation instead of growls did shrieks or screams, it could easily be black metal. So where did that sound, that identity was born? Was something very spontaneous? It was like, let's sound like completely different from everyone else in the New York scene.
Yeah, I mean, basically we all had the same influences and inspirations, coming up, and we leaned heavily towards the early German thrash stuff, like early Creator and early Sodom, all the stuff, early Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, that type of stuff. Who else? Destruction, early Destruction, Infernal Overkill, the Sentence of Death, all of that earlier stuff kind of straddled. It was thrash, yes, but it was also more brutal and darker. So, you know, it almost was like kind of bordered on the beginnings of death metal, just like Possessed, Seven Churches did. You know what I'm saying? So
invisible line between thrash and death. It was like,
yeah. So there were darker thrash elements there. You know, the vocals weren't really that deep back then. I mean, you know, you didn't really hear deep vocals, you know, back then that much. I mean, you know, so we took a lot of those earlier cues, you know, early Slayer, obviously all the earlier thrash stuff, you know, was a big influence on us. Um, so when Rigor Mortis started, you know, what they were doing was just completely new and unique to me. You know, I knew Andrew, the singer of Rigor Mortis, and me and a couple of my friends used to go to their rehearsals, you know, and when I heard the Rigor Mortis 87, the Decomposed demo, Andrew played it for myself and Will from Mortician at the time. The three of us were hanging out back, you know, in 87, and Rigor Mortis had just recorded that demo, had finished recording. They recorded each of the songs at different times, but when he played the song for Will and I, it was on a you know, just a jam box standing outside on the corner, and we listened to it, and Will and I were like, wow, holy shit, those vocals are heavy as fuck, you know. So that was kind of like my introduction to that kind of style of vocal, you know. And then obviously right after that, I discovered like stuff like Massacre and, you know, the early Death demos and early Morbid Angel stuff, you know. But even then, you know, like, you know, that deeper vocal style was so sick to me at the time. So yeah, that was different. So when Immolation started, when Andrew left Rigor Mortis, I was originally asked to join Rigor Mortis, but obviously the first couple of songs Bob wrote were very different than the more simplistic style of Rigor Mortis, which was much heavier, you know, and more brutal sounding. Immolation had a different vibe, you know. It's sicker. There was a lot more musically happening there, so we just felt it made sense to change the name at that point. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't really even supposed to be the singer. You know, I became the singer 2 weeks before our first show was scheduled. So I kind of jumped in, and I didn't really have any style because I had never sang before. So my earlier style kind of mimics more of those earlier German thrash styles, or the earlier stuff like Bathory that had more the raspier, sicker. Yeah, more the black metal style. But as you know, as I became more acclimated to playing and singing and, you know, becoming a vocalist, I kind of got deeper, and I wanted to do that deeper style. I just wasn't there yet. You know, I had to kind of get there.
5 years till the next album to perfect that. Speaking of your vocals, I just read on one big metal sites, like top 50 best death metal vocalist. You were number 1.
Get the fuck out of here. No fucking way. Wow. I mean, I can't believe that.
I agree. I mean, you know, when you hear Immolation, you know, it's Bob's sick guitar work, you know, and then it's your vocals.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, people can recognize your vocals from anywhere pretty much, you know. So
wow, that's kind of cool. I mean, you know, we never, you know, I obviously it's fun when you hear that stuff. We obviously don't, you know, have any aspirations to be on any kind of list like that, nor do we ever think we're worthy to be on any of these lists, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? We just kind of do what we do, and we hope everybody enjoys it, you know. So that's kind of cool to hear. You know, it's just nice that people recognize, you know, I guess the time, the energy, and the hard work you've put in all these years, and I guess they see it for something unique and something that's relevant, and I'll take it. I'm happy.
I was wondering about your vocal techniques. How much do you practice your vocals? I actually heard that you were driving trucks back in the day.
Yeah, I used to. I was a truck driver in Manhattan, of all places, for like 15 years.
Sorry, well, my other friend was also a trucker, but also vocalist. So when he has these long rides, he would put up, Morbid Angel, Immolation, that, and just while driving, he was rehearsing his vocals. So it's like, maybe Russ does that too. I don't know,
Yeah, I mean, not so much when I was driving the truck, because I had a helper working with me. So, I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure he probably would have quit after the first like 10 minutes of that shit.
I believe it. I was like, what the hell?
He would have been like, yeah, I think this guy needs a psych exam or something,
Yeah,
but I mean, back to the original question. Yeah, I mean, I do practice a lot, typically before a tour or before we're going in to record. I like to set aside at least a full month to a full month and a half, whether I practice every day or only like 3 to 4 days a week. I try to at least have 4 to 5 to 6 weeks of time to just kind of prep my voice and to kind of just get acclimated to the songs. When I hit the stage, I don't want to have to think about the lines, the lyrics, about what I'm playing. I want it to be like automatic. I want to be on autopilot. I want to enjoy the moment. I want to feel the music. I want to, enjoy the vibe. I want to connect with the audience. So I don't want to really be, tied down by stressing over, oh, am I ready? So it's just me. It's just how I am as a person. I need to have that time where when I can hit that stage and be comfortable and have my vocals in a place where I'm comfortable and there's no straining and I'm ready. So that's just a me thing. I'm very anal about that. I'm very OCD about that. So that's how I am as a person. So.
Okay. So the last question, you just announced North American tour, which will start in less than a month, if I'm not mistaken. So what songs will be on the set list? I think it's after 10 albums, 11 albums, it's going to be son of a bitch to pick and choose,
It's always, always the hardest part, my least favorite part. We have about 6 or 7 new songs we're going to have in the set list just because we love the new songs, love the new material, and we're excited about that. And we try to have a mixed bag, try to do some different stuff we haven't played. Of course, a couple of songs off the first record. We touch on Unholy Cult. We have something off of Unholy Cult because of the anniversary. And then we try, not as much off of Atonement just because we beat the shit out of Atonement for the last number of years. So, but we try to, do a mixed bag. So we hope the fans will be happy with what we've selected for this cycle. And we will keep, changing as the tours happen. So, but yeah, at least 6 or 7 songs. So yeah, that's the plan right now.
Okay. Any hope for a European tour? I know it's COVID now and all that, but we in Europe, we didn't saw you in a while, I think. So
yeah, probably not till 2023. We do the Netherlands Death Fest and the Dreamer Fest in late April, early May. And that's pretty much, I think, going to be it until 2023, just because it probably makes the most sense to wait it out. There's going to be a lot of competing tours, a lot of choices fans have to make. So it's probably not going to be fair to the fans. So we'll probably wait till 2023 when it's hopefully more normal in Europe. So we'll hopefully we'll see you then.
Okay. Ross, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations, big congratulations on your album, Acts of God. And
thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, man.
Thank you for the questions, man. I enjoyed talking to you, man. Have a good day, brother. Be good.
Thank you. Cheers.